Hello, I'm Richard Davies, a solutions journalist and co-host of both How Do We Fix It and Let's Find Common Ground. These podcasts are members of the Democracy Group. And the topic of this lesson is solutions journalism, why it's important to democracy. The lesson is part of a broader theme, podcasting to save democracy, which is a phrase that has special resonance, I think, at a time when democracy is under attack, both in the U.S. and in many other countries. I'm going to make the case for solutions journalism, why we need it, and also how this solutions journalism movement is going on in newsrooms around the world. It's relatively new, but also growing fast. Now, when I was at journalism school, which was a long time ago, we were taught the 5 W's. When reporting, editing, and producing a story, we were told, address these questions: who, what, when, where, why. Now, solutions journalists have come along and ask also, now what? So what do we mean by the term solutions journalism, which is sometimes called constructive news? I'm going to borrow the definition from a nonprofit organization that was formed nearly 10 years ago by 2 New York Times reporters and editors, David Bornstein and Tina Rosenberg. Solutions Journalism Network is a group that in less than a decade has worked with more than 600 news organizations and 30,000 journalists in training and other projects. Most of them are in the U.S., but they've also done them around the world. Solutions journalism investigates and explains in a critical and clear way how people try to solve widely shared problems. While journalists often describe news as what's gone wrong, solutions journalism tries to expand the definition. Responses to problems are also newsworthy. By adding rigorous coverage of solutions, journalists can then tell the whole story. Now, note the words critical and rigorous in that definition. Both are important concepts. Solutions journalism is not, hey, let's have some good news to report on, nor is it happy talk or advocacy. Solutions journalism does not have either a fixed or a dogmatic point of view. It is neither about quick fixes nor slogans. Just as investigative reporting should involve rigorous and critical work, so should solutions journalism. Solution stories do not celebrate responses to problems. They cover them, revealing what was done, how the responses worked, and what didn't, and why. Done well, solution stories provide valuable insights that can help communities with the tough work of tackling problems such as homelessness or climate change, skyrocketing housing prices, or low voter turnout. We also know from research that solution stories can change the tone of public discourse, making it less divisive and more constructive. By revealing what has worked, such stories have led to meaningful change. Let's take an example from the German TV network Deutsche Welle. They reported on COVID and low vaccination rates in the U.S., Germany, and many other nations. It's widely known that the vast majority of people who were hospitalized after testing positive with COVID were unvaccinated. DW did a story about Spain, which has one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. Spain is a democracy, and the healthcare system there did it without government mandates or incentives. The news story looked at what's behind the Spanish success story and what others can learn from it. Spain's universal healthcare system played a role. There is also a high level of trust in doctors and local family healthcare clinics in Spain. The government aimed vaccination campaigns at teenagers who are often in contact with older relatives who are much more at risk for health complications from the virus. The story was useful, and it was also popular with more than 1 million clicks on Twitter. There are countless examples of solutions journalism. Many stories compare a crisis in one community with constructive and sometimes successful approaches in others. Another example, ProPublica, the Palm Beach Post, and 2 regional radio stations in Florida partnered on a news investigation into how burning sugarcane can pollute communities of color who live near sugar fields, and how communities in Brazil showed there was another way. David Bornstein, one of the co-founders of Solutions Journalism Network, says solutions journalists ask these questions. What's working where? Which is very different from what's broken here. Who does it better than we do? For example, homeless rates have been growing in many big cities. Recently, the New York Times reported on different and more successful outcomes in Houston. Another question, how did they find their way to a better outcome? Bornstein calls this the detective story. And also, what's missing from our community that other communities seem to have? Now, you might still be skeptical about the case I'm trying to build, but consider this. Trust in journalism overall is really low. A recent survey from the Reuters Institute found that the United States has one of the highest news avoidance rates in the world. About 4 out of 10 Americans sometimes or often avoid contact with the news. That's a higher rate than in at least 30 other democracies. Also, consistently, across all countries, women are successfully more likely to avoid news than men. Why are people avoiding the news? Well, Amanda Ripley, who's a well-known solutions journalist and the author of several books, says the news is repetitive and dispiriting. Non-stop news about clashes and disasters can leave us feeling powerless. Solutions journalism can offer hope. And hope is associated by scientists with lower levels of depression, disease, and anxiety. Hope is like water, says David Bornstein. You need to have something to believe in. And I think he's right. But it can be an uphill battle in our bitterly divided country. Problems shout, solutions whisper. Bad news usually happens suddenly. More positive outcomes often take time. Another reason why democracy, which after all does depend on a certain level of trust, needs solutions journalism as part of our overall media diet.